Tal Havivi, Managing Director, Research and Development at ISTE+ASCD. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the 5 EdTech Quality Indicators for procurement processes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you provide an overview of the 5 EdTech Quality Indicators and why they are essential for K-12 procurement decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to start with the problem, EdTech is hard to evaluate, period. It's hard for technologists to evaluate, and it's hard for educationalists to evaluate. And we've been working to build infrastructure to simplify the way school districts and school systems around the world can evaluate technology. Today, about 80% of the way of what education institutions need in terms of evaluating an edtech product is pretty redundant from one school system to the next. And then really the hard part is the contextualization, things that are specific to the school district's state or local environment, or even in specific schools or classrooms. So we're not focusing on the contextual piece of that hardest 20%. We're trying to simplify the redundant piece that happens one school system to the next. So there are 7 associations who are leaders in the edtech space, including CAST, COSIN, Innovate EDU, CEDA, ISTE+ASCD, One EdTech, and Digital Promise, came together and aligned on shared language of what is important in edtech. And we aligned on these 5 areas of edtech worth evaluating. That's interoperable, usable, inclusive, evidence-based, and safe. And within each of those, there's ways of validating that an edtech tool meets that standard. But the first step was really making sure that those were the agreed upon 5 areas. And the organizations now are working to identify what validators, what quality indicators exist that can be trusted by school systems around the country.
What common mistakes do districts make when evaluating edtech tools, and how can these quality indicators help mitigate those risks?
Yep, absolutely. So one mistake is school systems often rely on word of mouth. So a decision maker will ask their neighboring school district, what tool do you use for elementary supplemental math for 3rd grade, something like that. And that, while there's certainly value in hearing from your peers, it's not necessarily a reliable way of evaluating if the edtech is right for you. Another challenge that a lot of education institutions have is, in the past, I'd say pre-pandemic, a lot of school systems didn't have robust ways of evaluating edtech. It was anything goes. You just have to either, if you have the money, or you ask your principal, or sometimes there's a process, but sometimes there's not. So there was not enough rigor in evaluating edtech. And in some instances, we are now in a situation where there is so much rigor in having an edtech product evaluated in a school district that educators will just seek to abandon the process altogether. They don't trust that it is worth the time to have this product fully evaluated, and they'll look for ways outside of that process and just start using tools that are free, maybe not up to snuff around data privacy or other issues like that. So one way of remediating or preparing for that is making sure that you have a product request process in a school system that is usable, right? It's something that whoever the end user will be feels comfortable and confident in that process itself. And as it relates to the 5 quality indicators, a lot of the work that we do is send these quality indicators out into the world to be leveraged by school districts. So if a school system is able to leverage a data privacy agreement that is shared across the entire state or multiple states, or relies on things like, we want to make sure a product is super usable by an educator, there is a product certification that focuses on teacher usability. So rather than going and doing a deep dive of, is this usable for teachers, you can rely on these trusted third parties who do that evaluation on behalf of the school systems.
How can edtech providers align their products with these quality indicators to better meet the needs of schools and districts?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that EdTech providers can leverage these quality indicators to meet the needs of districts. For one, a lot of early stage organizations come to ISTE and ASCD and they say, hey, we want your help in one way or another. And one of the things that we offer is the ISTE seal, which is our product certification. And that really evaluates if products are technically and pedagogically usable by a teacher, right? So does it help a teacher in terms of, is it the UX and UI good, but also does it help a teacher in that the tool guide enables and supports them to not just deliver whatever instruction they want to deliver, but high quality instruction that we know is effective. If earlier stage companies oftentimes are not ready for that process, they may not have a fully built out suite of product features. And so in instances like that, we will just share the application and share the framework, and they use that as product roadmap, as a way to prioritize their product roadmap. What can we build now? What do we know that we are not building, but will seek to build in the future? So for earlier stage companies, I think it's really helpful in informing product roadmap. For companies that have mature products in the market and are looking to expand, leveraging these quality indicators is a way of really building credibility in the education market, which is such a trust-driven, human-driven market, that it can really help amplify the exposure of these companies to the right decision makers within school systems.
What role do educators, IT leaders, and administrators play in applying these quality indicators during the procurement process?
There's a lot of ways that various stakeholders in a school system can employ these quality indicators. Before I go into that, I'll say the EdTech market, to no one's surprise who's in this space, knows that it's an irrational market, right? It's not that the best products are the most used products and that create the greatest impact. Unfortunately, there's a lot of competing incentives and broken feedback loops within the EdTech market that cause some products that may not be high quality to be used across a district. Or there are products that are really great, but they can't get the time of day with the decision maker. And so there's a lot of ways that educators as one audience can use these quality indicators to consolidate, like, this is the thing we care about. So if I'm a teacher, I will say, I really want the product to be usable by me. I care about that. There's so much ed tech that's clunky, and it may have really good content in it, but I can't access it because it's just too clunky. If I am someone in the IT department, I may say, when products are not interoperable, my job is really hard. And so they can look towards things like One EdTech or Project Unicorn certifications and say, I need to know that you meet this interoperability standard. And when they are saying that, it's not just to each other, but also to the product providers. Most product developers, almost every product developer I've met in the ed tech space is in it for the right reasons. But there's so much noise around what is important. And so the ability to rally around these quality indicators helps cut through that noise and helps these providers prioritize what is most important in evaluating ed tech. I'd say one of the other key levers is when the procurement teams include quality indicators in their RFP process. Said another way, you say, inclusivity is really important. And accessibility is really important to our school system. And because of that, if you have the CAST certification, you get additional points on this RFP. That is a very tangible way for school systems to show that having a quality product can unlock dollars for a provider. So those are just a few examples of ways that various stakeholders in school systems can leverage quality indicators to create a more tangible demand signal to providers. What I'd also like to add is there's a lot of resources available to school systems on ways to evaluate ed tech. So one example is We have something called the EdTech Index, which is a K-12 catalog, an EdTech catalog where K-12 decision makers can go to find, evaluate, and compare EdTech tools. So essentially, all of that information that is not unique to school systems, we try to specific local contexts, we try to aggregate it and put it in a catalog. So if I want to evaluate four formative assessments, formative assessment technologies, I can just look at all four next to each other and see, what is the age range, what's the price of these, what are some of the other differences, and then I think most interestingly, what are the various quality indicators that each product has? Which ones have data privacy agreements in place? Which ones have been validated to be evidence-based? Which ones have the ISTE seal? And that's just a way of helping do a lot of that early research in one place, so that just the actual burden of evaluating ed tech is, again, pushed back to the associations and is not squarely on the shoulders of the schools.
How do you see these quality indicators evolving as new technologies and learning models emerge in K-12 education?
So there's always a question of how ed tech will evolve and how school systems will evolve. And I think there's a few things, not to be a curmudgeon, but that will hold true. School systems are super durable, for better or for worse. We had an entire pandemic and $190 billion pushed into schools. And if you go into a school today, it doesn't look dramatically different from when it did in 2019 before the pandemic. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing is technology is changing so rapidly. And with that, there are other things that are really important to evaluate. One example is the safety and data privacy with AI. So there are organizations that have come about recently, like EdSafe AI, and others that are helping evaluate what are the important things to think about and to ask about as school leaders in terms of what is safe and is my data and my students' data safe. The other things that I think we're in the early days of is understanding what is the unique affordances of emerging technologies as it relates to instructional use. So a lot of conversations around generative AI today are actually just conversations about edtech broadly, and we are still wrapping our heads around what are the unique affordances. What does generative AI do that was not previously available, and how can we evaluate that in an instructional use case? So some examples are, how do we evaluate the data that is going into large language models? How do we evaluate the data that is coming out of large language models? And what's the instructional, sort of the nutritional instructional value of those? Those are just a couple examples. Other things that are coming down the pipe are, when multimodality comes into play more, where students may be able to engage with voice rather than just on a screen. Like that will also unlock new opportunities. There's tons of research around student talk time and how that can support students in learning better. And we have not really included that as a core tenet of EdTech, just because it hasn't been a core part of the technology so far that is commonly used across school systems. But I imagine that will continue to evolve, and both those 7 associations I mentioned and others will just evolve with it.
Well, Tal Havivi of ISTE and ASCD, thank you so much for talking to us today.
This was great. Thanks for having me.